Greetings, my fellow Earthlings. How are we all doing today? I hope you guys are okay. And thank you for joining me for a bit of a serious quickie today. So here we have this little cushion case watch by Longines with wire lugs in sterling silver from the 1920s. The movement serial number puts it at approximately around 1922, and by then the Longines watch company was already about 90 years old, while Rolex was still just a spotty teenager, as Longines was founded in 1832. 1832. Astonishing. That's almost as old as I am. It houses a manual wind movement, caliber 11.84N. The earlier iteration of this movement dates back to 1899. There are so many service marks left by legends from the past. But I've been told this watch hasn't been worn or serviced for about 40 years, since the late 70s, early 80s. So all the oils and lubricants would be congealed by now, hence why the watch works intermittently and about 300 seconds a day slow, but remarkably it still looks great. World War One saw Longines and other manufacturers quite active in providing more practical alternatives to the pocket watch for military use, which gave rise to the trench watch, which was a combination of pocket watch meets wristwatch. After the war, civilians would have been inspired and interested in wearing similar watches as their heroes, so those trench watches evolved into these types of watches, I guess. Even good old Albert Einstein had a couple of Longines himself back then, even though time was relative.
What? You mean like his uncle?
No, not that kind of relative. The name Longines was derived from a Longines, which means long meadows, after its birthplace, Saint-Imier in Switzerland. Wow, look at the beautiful detailing on this. So I'll disassemble the movement, inspect all the parts, give it a good clean in the cleaning machine, and then reassemble everything with some fresh lubrication. I start off by removing the balance wheel. I'm quite impressed with some of the detailing on this movement, and look how cool those individual train cocks are instead of a single train bridge. The click and the click spring are actually underneath the barrel bridge, and to let the power down from the mainspring, there's this neat little screw here on the top. And once I've released the power from the mainspring, I can remove the barrel bridge, which is held in with these 3 screws. And so now I'll just remove the train, and as you can see, the escape wheel, the 4th wheel and the 3rd wheel have their own individual cocks, as opposed to having one single bridge. Now if you're new to watchmaking and you'd like to have a go, a large pocket watch movement or these very simple manual wind movements are a very good place to start. For those of you who are interested in the names of parts and wheels, here you can see all the wheels in the train. The mainspring barrel with the ratchet wheel can be classed as the 1st wheel. Then you have the 2nd wheel or center wheel, the 3rd wheel, and the 4th wheel which holds the subsidiary seconds, and then the escape wheel. And now I'm just removing the pallet fork. And now I'll just flip the movement over and disassemble the keyless works. A lot of you have asked me in my previous videos how I remember where all the parts go and how I organize everything, especially if there isn't a technical sheet available for a very old movement. Well, after a while, you will recognize the parts in any movement you come across, just as a mechanic would recognize the alternator, starter motor, engine, or gearbox, regardless of what brand of car they were working on. So don't despair in the beginning, as with time you will also be able to recognize these parts. But here is another shot of how to organize your parts and screws when disassembling when you're a beginner. Once you have removed everything and you have lined them up, take some pictures, and then once they are out of the cleaning machine, you can reorganize everything using the photos. And so here you can see beneath the barrel bridge, the crown wheel, the click and click spring. I'll just reinstall the balance before all the parts go into the wash. Here I'm just removing the mainspring, and it's the potential energy stored within this coiled up piece of steel that provides all the power to our watch. So I'm just going to prepare the case by straightening out these wire lugs before I start the polishing process. Silver is a very soft metal, so if you're attempting to polish a silver case and the scratches are not too deep, then you can always attempt this process by hand with some silver polish or even Brasso and a clean cloth. Silver tarnishes very easily, so most of the time a hand polish can get things looking rather bling without the need for heavy abrasives and machinery. The same also applies to this plastic plexiglass. You can easily remove the scratches by hand using various grits of sandpaper, maybe starting off from 600 grit, then moving upwards to about 1200, and then use some polywatch for a final finish. I'll add some links in the description. So the first and second cutting stage are done, and during the washing process I realized that there was some adhesive on the bezel where the glass sits. This usually means that the current plexiglass is the wrong size, hence why it's been glued down. And here is that polished up plexiglass. I'm sure I'll find a use for it somewhere else. How's it going, mate?
Are there any more iPad chargers in your room?
How many have you broken so far? 10.
I didn't broke it. It broke by itself.
It broke by itself?
Yeah.
How did you do that?
And you got the fake. I know
It's not fake. How is it fake?
Because it got charged. Let me go get me some more. I never broke it. It broke by itself.
Okay, I'll get you some more. After removing all the loose adhesive, you can see the minute gap between the bezel and the glass. The plexiglass should be slightly wider than the bezel, so it can squeeze tight into position without the need for any adhesive. So this one's about 22.6, is around 23. But I'll have to buy new from the workshop. So we have this 232, which is just slightly bigger, and that's what we want. We want it to snap into place. There you go.
Can I make a house out of this?
Now that I've sorted all that out, I can apply the final polish to the case. So as I mentioned earlier, now that all the parts are washed, you can reorganize them as before using the picture that you took previously. I'll start off by reinstalling the mainspring, and because I'm reusing this old mainspring, I'll apply a small amount of grease. And there are various ones out there that you can use, such as Mobius 8200, which is what I'm using, and there is also 8300 and a few others. And it's the same with some of the other greases, where there is a choice between old school natural oils, which is what would have been used back in the day, and as lubrication technologies have evolved, we have more stable synthetic oils. And here's a glimpse of all the parts lined up with their corresponding screws. I'm using a bit of D5 on the mainspring barrel arbor. And D5 on the post for the crown wheel. Some D5 on the rim for the crown wheel core, and also on the rim for the shouldered screw. and use a small amount of grease on the click where the click meets the spring. D5 on the setting lever screw, and that's the escape wheel going in first, and a small amount of D5 on the fourth wheel, which also has the pivot for the subsidiary seconds hand, followed by the third wheel and then the center wheel with a small amount of D5 on the center wheel. Make sure everything moves freely before you start tightening all the screws fully. And now some D5 on the mainspring barrel arbor, some D5 on the center wheel, and some D5 on the third wheel. 90-10 on the fourth wheel and the escape wheel. And now onto the other side, and I'll assemble the keyless works and a small amount of grease on the sliding pinion and the winding pinion, and a small amount on the shoulders where the winding pinion will sit. And some grease on the winding stem. And now I'm installing the setting lever. Some D5 in the groove of the sliding pinion before I install the yoke. Now this yoke doesn't sit on a post and is held in using a shouldered screw, so we'll add some D5 here. And now the yoke spring. I'll engage the yoke spring with the yoke and apply a small amount of grease where the two parts rub against each other, and also where the yoke meets the setting lever. And then clean any excess with some Radico. Here I'm installing the setting lever spring, and I'll apply some grease where the spring meets the lever. D5 on the post for the intermediate wheel and the minute wheel. And I'll also oil the pivots for the train as we did on the opposite side. This particular setting wheel doesn't sit on a post, it has its own pivots, so we'll put some D5 on the pivots. And now we can complete installing the balance, and we'll start off with the pallet fork. Before screwing this down fully, we'll give the mainspring a few winds and check to see if everything is installed correctly. The pallet should flick back and forth with a gentle prod. It looks good, so we'll just continue to screw everything down. And now I'm using some Mobius 941 on the exit jewel. Now some D5 on the center shaft for the cannon pinion, and some on the cannon pinion for the hour wheel. Some 90-10 on the lower balance cap jewel. And some 90-10 on the upper balance cap jewel. And now on this particular model, you do have to dismantle the whole balance in order to get to the screws which hold in the cap jewel. And this is a similar system to the Rolex restoration that I did on the previous video, which I didn't include in the video for some reason. So if you're a bit stuck on that Rolex movement, then it's the same principle as this one. And so there you have it, folks. I really enjoyed working on this really simple yet elegant piece, especially seeing all that lovely detailing and trying to imagine all those masters from the past who have left their signature on this watch. Some of you always ask me if I inscribe the watches with my signature after servicing them, and the answer is no. I do not feel my name is a worthy inclusion alongside theirs. And also, I don't like scratching things up. And yes, we have markers nowadays, I suppose. Also, a lot of you ask if these watches are for sale. Well, most belong to clients, so sadly they're not usually for sale. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one and found the oiling and technical side of it a little bit more helpful. So until next time, peace and love to you all. Look after each other, and if the Almighty wills, I'll see you on the next one. Ta-ra!